All right, hello everyone. Thanks for hopping on the stream today. So, given the sort of state of everything that's going on, I wanted to keep going with our project we were working on with the Find My Rep interface and all that. So let me get this all sort of going here and make sure that we've got the right scale so you all can see everything properly. Looks good to me. Awesome. So on Sunday we did a bit of a stream where we switched from working on our Warzone voice-based controller, where we're trying to make it possible to use virtual assistants like Alexa and Google Assistant to issue commands in Warzone, given our character movement and stuff like that. And we made a ton of progress on that over the first couple streams we did, and then things just kind of went weird in our country, and we started to see more situations of police brutality and the systemic racism against people of color in our country. And so what we wanted to do instead with this stream and with the videos on YouTube is to show you how to use this tech that we've been learning and building around virtual assistants, conversational AI, scalable architectures, cloud development, all that, to do something good. So video games aside, I can give a status update on that and sort of where we're at and where we're headed. But in the meantime, we're going to continue working on this Find My Rep application. Now, last Sunday, today's Wednesday, last Sunday, a few days ago, is when we started the project from scratch. And the goal of the project was to be able to, ask for your government's information, like your representatives, who represents you no matter where you live in the United States. This only applies to the United States, I should clarify. But, being able to ask who represents you and get their contact information, emails, phone numbers, stuff like that. What we did was we built the Find My Rep app. And it's all on GitHub. You can view it yourself, use it yourself, deploy it yourself all day long. And really what we have here is an ASP.NET Core API with an integration into the Google Civic Information API. Information, which is an incredible tool that Google's made accessible, where you can get all types of information about your government, and also about about candidates for voting, the things they back, stuff like that. It's backed by change.org, vote.org, and the Voting Information Project, all partnered around this, right? So it's so much data that we have access to. And what we wanted to do was take that away from some API where we have to worry about JSON and make it as accessible as possible. That's really the goal of this, right? Like, in order to create change in our community is to we need to be able to access the people who have a position of power that are supposed to represent us, from our local government and people in your towns and your cities, all the way up to the federal government, even as far as the president and vice president. So, our goal is to surface that information in as many ways as possible, and to really just break down the barrier so people can contact them without having to go through the trouble of looking it up, even though you can Google it. But not everyone thinks that way, and people are using their virtual assistants for a lot more. So trying to combine, that technology that we've been working within on this stream, on Suave Streams, and also doing it for a good cause and to help people learn more and be more proactive. It's not enough to just sort of sit at home anymore. We have real problems in our society and in our country, in the States, and hopefully this is at least a tool someone will use to help make a difference as well. So Sunday, we got started with that. We set up the ASP.NET Core API. I've got it open right here. I switched to dark theme, by the way. Last stream, I think we were still on light theme. I talked to a few folks, and basically, I'm used to doing light theme for presentations and things like that, which is sort of my background. I haven't been streaming for very long, but mostly doing on-site speaking and presentations on giant projectors and screens and stuff like that, where light theme works well for people in the back. But you're on your own screen. You can enjoy my dark theme. Most people use Visual Studio and VS Code with some sort of dark theme, so I'm going to stick with this for now. If you have opposition to it, if you have a hard time reading this or following along, let me know in the chat or in the comments on YouTube, and I'm happy to go back. I don't really personally care what theme I use. I just dark theme is what I use for a long time, but light theme doesn't bother me. I definitely use both every day. So here's our API. It's called the Find My Rep API. It's literally a single ASP.NET Core app, and what we have is two controllers for Alexa and for Dialogflow. To catch everyone up, Dialogflow is what we're using for our Google deployments. So we created a Google action and a Dialogflow agent that are used to handle the natural language understanding processing. We build a model on there. It sends requests to our API. We send responses back down. Google speaks it. Alexa, it's all sort of in-house. We build the language model on the Alexa developer console. We handle the webhook calls to us, and we build our responses and send them down. We went as far Sunday as building the whole damn thing, all ASP.NET Core, Alexa, and Google Assistant, and even published both of them. So we went through the whole publishing process, learned how to actually publish an Alexa skill to be public, right? So anyone can consume this now, and we also tried to do the same thing for Google. So today, let's start with basically a status update on these. If they got rejected, we can make whatever updates we need to accordingly and get them resubmitted. The faster we get these out, the earlier people can use them and start making a difference. That's sort of my mindset going through this. But, not everyone has an Alexa device. Not everyone uses Google Assistant, so we're going to talk about other ways to make this more accessible. One of the things we also did in that sort of same vein is when we created our Google action, again using Dialogflow. So if we go to the Dialogflow console where this exists, and hopefully I'm signing into the right account here, on Find My Rep, we also showed how we can use it as a chatbot, and we threw that in chat yesterday. So if we go to the integrations, we have our Google Assistant integration, which is how it's all connected up here, and then we also have our web demo set up. And if you go to bot.dialogflow.com/findmyrep and you just put in your area code, we were testing a lot with 02110, which is Boston's downtown area code, you're going to get all of the information about everyone that represents you from the U.S. Senate all the way down to your local government. So once we wake up our API, we get the phone numbers and emails of whatever is available. So for U.S. Senate in Massachusetts, which is where Boston is and what the zip code is, we've got Ed Markey and we've got Elizabeth Warren in the Senate. We've got Charlie Baker, who's our governor. We have our lieutenant governor's information, and we go all the way down through everyone in the Boston City Council to everyone that we could possibly call or email to let them know what we're thinking, right? So that's the goal here, and that's what we have. And that works on this Dialogflow chatbot, Google Actions, and Alexa. Now, let's check on these statuses. So I literally just logged in here, and this is live. So on Alexa, Find My Rep is up. So let's go take a look at what we can do with that in a bit. But for now, let's also check on the Google side, and then we'll circle back to Amazon, basically. So under the Deploy tab, I saw this when we switched tabs here, but we got denied for two reasons. If we go to more information, Google will tell us why we got rejected. Okay, so there's basically these two, and then this is like the full description from the tester as to why it was these two things. So your action either leaves the mic open for a user command without a prompt, such as a greeting or an implicit or explicit question, and your action continuously plays non-streaming media or reads back text to the user longer than 240 seconds without using immediate response. Okay. Reading the full note here, thank you, blah, 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 unfortunately been denied. No kidding. Your action violates user experience policies. Your action listens to a user command without a prompt or an explicit, yeah, that's the thing. After the action responds to details, information, or help, so that's that help intent, the mic remains open without a prompt back to the user. For example, details, information, help. You said something I don't understand. Okay, so this was our fallback response. Try something else later, and the mic stays open, right? So they're basically saying you can't just say this and then open the mic back up to listen to the user. You either need to end the session or you need to actually prompt them with something. I think I know why that's happening. We'll take a look in a sec, but let's finish reading this. At this point, either prompt the user with further options. You can ask for another zip code's reps. That's what we usually prompt for our other answers, or close the action. And yeah, blah, blah, blah. We know this stuff. All right, number two, your action violates our user experience policies again. While testing the action, we found that it continuously plays audio. Okay, so we have what they said, right? So we know the zip code they asked for, 90060. I'm actually curious, what zip code is this? is California. Yeah, this is LA. So they asked for an LA zip code, and they got a response that was being read out for more than 4 minutes. So we probably have a ton of information coming from that zip code that we weren't expecting. And let's see if we hit it in Dialogflow. Oh yeah, look at this response. Okay, so we've got the U.S. Senators, Dianne Feinstein, Kamala Harris. We also have U.S. representatives from here. So we've got Jimmy Gomez. We've got the governor, Gavin Newsom, lieutenant governor. I mean, this isn't that long, but I think what the issue is that, you know, we get all the way down to the mayor, but we also get like the sheriff and a lot of city representatives. And I think what I imagine the issue to be is that this taking the time to read this out from Google Assistant is taking longer than that 240 seconds or 4 minutes. So that seems to be their response. Yeah, so they're not allowed to, blah, blah, blah. Please allow for breaks during which the users are asked if they want to continue listening or exit the conversation. Okay, so let's see what this, how long this actually creates an audio file for on Google Assistant. So we can go to the simulator here. We can say talk to find my rep to get started, and then I'm just going to paste this here. And what I want to do is monitor the network. You can even see how long it's taking to process that. I want to see if they return the actual audio file that's going to be spoken, and see if we can basically figure out how, like, the actual timestamp or how long it is. That's content rating. It doesn't even show us the full text. That's so funny. Oh my gosh, we went 2 seconds over reading this response, and I have a feeling LA or New York City are probably going to be the longest. So we can either implement a whole bunch of stuff to break this up and resubmit it, or we can cut down on the stuff that's static, which might be better anyway, and that way we can cut down on the 2 second limit that we breached, right? 2 seconds of audio it's a couple words, so we were it's kind of a silly thing to get knocked for. Also, check out these double scroll bars. That's how massive this request is. We broke their CSS on their new simulator. Okay, so let's do this. Circling back to Alexa, right? We'll end up fixing this stuff for Google next, but I want to talk about how we can actually use this skill because I think it's important. So the Find My Rep Alexa skill was approved. Honestly, I was a little surprised at this because there is a requirement, and maybe this just isn't true anymore. Certificate error. There used to be, at least, and maybe they just didn't. Maybe they just removed this requirement, but there used to be a thing where if you didn't use Lambda, if you used ASP.NET Core or whatever, any HTTPS webhook call, right? So if we go and look at how this stuff is set up, there's 2 ways to set up the endpoint. You can either use a Lambda or you can do a request over HTTPS. We're hosting our thing as an API in Azure, so everything is running over just an HTTPS call. There used to be, and I don't know if it's still here and they just missed it, or if they actually removed that requirement, but there used to be a restriction where they would send up a bunch of different type of like certificate information, and you had to actually like validate against that. I actually have a blog post on it, I think, Alexa, where I talk about how to do it in C#. Registration, certificate. Might be this. No, this is using Lambda. There's more. Hold on. We got plenty more to look at. SSML. Hosting in Azure. I feel like this is where we talked about it. Right, so this is all the same type of code that we wrote earlier. We have an HTTP post. Can we find this in the Alexa list? Yeah, that's what I was going to check next. It says it's live. I need to figure out how to find it, and I'm going to put a link in chat. Just stepping through here, I want to figure out if they actually have that validation requirement or not. But basically, they used to send up like a separate certificate, and you'd have to like do extra validation against it. Basically, they'd send like a token in the request and a certificate, and you had to like hash match, and you had to send back a bad request or an HTTP status code of 400 if it didn't match that. And we didn't do that. If we look at the code that we have for our Alexa controller, it's dead simple, right? We don't do that check at all. We always are going to return a 200 unless some exception is thrown, in which case we will throw a 500 because we're not, wrapping this in a try catch or anything. But I think they just removed that restriction or they missed it. So, but either way, I mean, it says it's live. I got the email this morning too. So if we go back, once an Alexa skill is live, you basically have two versions now. They both have the same skill ID, so if you do validation against that, that's fine. Which is also another thing that we didn't do. We didn't validate that the skill ID is this one, which means any of you guys can go build a skill that also hits my endpoint. And personally, I'm fine with that, but they used to require you to validate against that as well. But either way, we now have these two versions. We have the live version and the in development. So let's go to Alexa skills. And now let's see if we can find it. Find my rep. Here it is. Okay, so we can go enable this. I'm signed into my personal accounts and we already have the test version, but I'm gonna put this in chat. So if any of you guys want to actually start using it on your own Alexa devices, you can take this and publish it. And the Walk Right By LLC, that is me. So this is the actual published skill by me. This is the icon we made. This is all the stuff we wrote. So if you follow that link, you can either open it in the Alexa app on your phone or on the browser. And once you enable it, as long as you're signed in with your Amazon account, then you're good to go. So have at it. Just to sort of show you what that looks like, I can say, Alexa, open Find My Rep. Alexa, open Find My Rep. Turn it up.
Contact information and details about your representatives from federal to local. Just say your zip code.
01887.
Here are all of your representatives.
All right, so it's going to list off all my stuff in northern Massachusetts.
You can contact Edward J. Markey. You can contact
Alexa, exit.
phone. Would you like to rate Find My Rep?
Ooh, yes. Give me 5 stars. Let's go.
Okay. How many stars do you want to rate it out of 5?
5.
Thanks. I've submitted your 5-star rating.
Oh, that's sick. I've never actually seen that go.
Please go to your Alexa app.
Cool. All right. Well, definitely leave a review. The higher the reviews are, the more likely it is to show up for people when they just say it. Alternatively, from following that link, if you also say enable Find My Rep, it should work. It's the only one with that invocation name, which I'm surprised no one has built this yet. So if you say enable Find My Rep, that might work, or even if you say open Find My Rep, it might suggest it. But if you leave a 5-star review, it's going to make it easier for people to find, so that way we can get this in front of more people. And I'll tweet about this later as well. But we need to check on Google Assistant, right? So when we went to deploy, we had these 2 issues. We got rejected for leaving the mic open on basically our fallback response. And thanks, Raventhorn. And we got booted because we hit 4 minutes and 2 seconds, which is 2 seconds over the 4-minute limit in a response, or that 240 seconds. So the cool thing is we shouldn't have to change anything in Google Actions. All we have to do is update our API code, which is great because we can publish this API code anytime we want and it'll just work. So what I'm going to do actually is ahead of time, I'm going to create a new release. And that way when it gets into the review period, likely tomorrow, we'll have already made these updates, and hopefully we can try to kind of game the system a little bit and get ahead of it. So over in Visual Studio, let's go take a look at our dialog flow controller, which is where things sort of went wrong. So here's the issue, right? The way we sort of scaffolded our code and abstracted it is to say, if we got the welcome message, go get the welcome message. If we got any intent that contains zip code, go do all the zip code logic in the info response service. Otherwise, say ask and we get the fallback message. Now, they basically said that our fallback message doesn't prompt the user enough and it keeps the mic open. So we have 2 options. We can either turn the mic off and end the session, or we can provide a way to ask that we know is going to work. So if they say something out of bounds, we can tell them what they can do. And I think that's probably the better experience, because if we kick them out, we're telling them like, oh, I guess the way I should say it is like, it's a negative response to someone just not knowing how to use it. And instead, we want to encourage them to use it. We still want people to ask for their government's information, but we want to show them and teach them how to do it. So we can do that just by updating our default response for our fallback message. I'm also surprised that Alexa was cool with this, but then again, I think in the Alexa controller, we don't use the ask, we use response.tell. So I think I'm going to change both because I think it'll be a better experience overall. So to clarify a couple things, the reason the microphone stays open is because we set this flag to true. This expect user response is true. The same thing is also true when you build an Alexa response. We're using Alexa.net's response builder to say .tell versus .ask. The difference between these is that .tell sends the should end session to true. Ask sends should end session to false. So it's interesting. Dialogflow took like the positive response Boolean model, and Alexa took the negative. So on Alexa, you send should end session. If it's true, it ends it. If it's false, it doesn't. Dialogflow, you say, are we expecting the user to respond, yes or no? So they're opposites. I still want to keep this as true. I want to keep people in here. I want them to keep asking about different government information. But what we need to do is give a better fallback message. So let's go update our implementation of our get fallback message. So you said something I don't understand. Try something else later. This isn't cool. This sentence right here is lame. We shouldn't be saying that. So instead, we should give them an example of what to say. We can say something like, you can say your zip code to get all of the government information for your area, or ask for a specific office such as we can do escaped quotes here, shuffle over so you all can see it, such as governor of and your zip code. All right, so let's use this as our response, and I'm also going to go to our Alexa controller and change this from a tell to an ask. And with this, we have to add the additional reprompt of null, which is fine. So I'm just going to publish this. We don't really need to test it too much. We go to our publish. We just send that to findmyrep.azurewebsites.net. And once it's done, we can go back to Google, test it out, say something ridiculous, just send it some dummy text, get that sort of fallback intent or something else. We can even test their exact scenario where they said like details / more information or whatever. And we can make sure that works. And then we'll also validate on Alexa that everything works properly. Okay, over on Google, I'm going to go back to test, and we'll say talk to find my rep, and then we'll respond with some nonsense. I'm just going to smash my keyboard a whole bunch. So the response we get, you said something I don't understand yet. You can say your zip code to get all government information in your area, or ask for specific government such as governor of and your zip code. Let me unmute this, and we'll cancel, and we'll do that again. That way you all can hear it as well, and I can hear it.
Getting the test version of Find My Rep. Welcome to...
Smash the keyboard.
You said something I don't understand yet. You can say your zip code to get all of the government information for your area, or ask for a specific office such as governor of and your zip code.
So I feel like it should probably prompt the user a little bit more. Like, we're telling them what they can say, but it might not be obvious that the mic should open up again. So what I'm going to do is update that just a little bit more with just like a sort of inflection on a question. So in the response service, I'm going to say, so how can I help? And that'll be good enough. Okay, the other issue we had was that for LA, and I imagine the same thing is going to be true for New York, and actually it might be worth testing. So let's find a New York City zip code and try it out. Oh, they've got all the... This is a beautiful one, huh? What zip code is this? I want like a Manhattan one. That'll do. Okay, so let's try this on Google and see what the response is and how long the audio is. And we're gonna mute this before it runs forever. Okay, so expanding this and going to audio, Oh, so that's under the 2-minute mark. So, I mean, like, it's probably just LA. Maybe Chicago. Chicago zip code. Let's find one here. 6007. What side of Chicago is this? No, I want downtown. All right, this is by the airport, which probably doesn't have a ton of area because it's not going to hit a lot of residential. I know 606 just from people I know who currently live in Chicago and getting their zip code. Forest Glen. All right, let's just try this. All right, we can say another zip code. We can go back to back to back all day long and ask about all these zip codes, governments. Get our response back. It's taking a while, which makes me think that it's going to be a pretty big response. Audio, 239. Oh, no, we have up to 4 minutes, right? What was the one that they used? Go back to deploy. It was like 90600 or something like that. Thank goodness we can get all this info. Yeah, 90060. Okay, let's go back and make sure. Because it's 240 seconds, which is 4 minutes if my monkey brain works properly here doing math. Right, so this should be 4 minutes and 2 seconds if it's consistent with what we saw before. So basically, we can either implement a whole bunch of really complicated business logic, or we can cut out 2 seconds. I'm in favor of cutting out 2 seconds. That way we can at least get this into people's hands faster. We can always adjust it later. So basically what's happening is when we get this response async for a zip code in the all zip code intent, where we're iterating over every government office we have other than president and vice president, which we exclude by checking to make sure that the name doesn't even contain the word president, we're adding that to the response. And we say, for the office of, and the name, you can contact blank. And then we go through the name, and then we can say you can contact them via phone, by, and we only grab the first phone, and then by email if they have any. So we need to cut out 2 seconds here, and we don't have a whole lot of static text that we can use. And I'm wondering just about how much of it is really going to make up the 2 seconds. So here are all your, let's just start cutting little things. Reps. We'll even get rid of their offices because that's going to be redundant when we say, we don't really need to say for the office. We can just say for U.S. Senate. All right, let's try this. I'm going to publish this again. That way we can just test right away on our Google side, and we're just going to keep using that one zip code. It's pretty funny that they literally found the issue. I wonder how many zip codes they tested. I know that we can either get testers on the East Coast or the West Coast, just from experience from all the actions I've helped deploy. I wonder, like, coincidentally, if we were to get an East Coast tester, if we wouldn't have had this issue because they would have tested with their own. That would have been funny, but let's see what we get for our audio response. Let's just make sure we're under 4 minutes. All right, expanding this one, audio, 351. We just cut 9 seconds out of that. Oh, that's right, because it's going to be iterated over every single one. So literally, like, changing the fact that we got rid of, like, 3 words in all of the responses, because we're talking about, like, 50 people, like, right, we're iterating over this so many times. I'm actually curious how many times, which we can test. We hit it so many times that, like, removing 3 words actually dropped, what is that, from 402 to 351, we dropped 11 seconds off of an entire response on a single response just by cutting out like 3 or 4 words. But we still want to make sure this sounds okay, which we can do by unmuting.
In general, you can contact Xavier Becerra.
Because it's still going.
You can contact them by phone at 916-445-9555 for here are all of your reps, or you can contact Betty T. You can contact them by phone at 9.
So another thing that's interesting here, right? We say for blank you can contact, and then we say you can contact them again, right? This even just kind of sounds silly. Why don't we just say at? Or, you can contact Elizabeth Warren. Why don't we just let's just get rid of this, and we don't even need this. I kind of want to say also in this response, like we kind of need a little better English here. If we have both phones, if we have both phones and emails, then we should add an or in there, right? So if official phones and official, oh, forget my ampersands, official.emails.any is true, and we're doing the explicit true because we're adding that nullable check there. Then we want to say response plus equals or, and we need a space at the end, right? So if it's like, let's say Elizabeth Warren is the rep, and we have both phone and email, it'll say, for U.S. Senate, you can contact Elizabeth Warren by phone at phone number or by email at. But if we don't have email and phone, let's say we just have phone, we'll say for Office U.S. Senate, you can contact Elizabeth Warren by phone at blah, blah, blah. Or if it's just email for the office, for U.S. Senate, you can contact Elizabeth Warren by email at. That's so much better. So let's go ahead and publish this again. And then I want to check again to see how much more time we cut off by even shortening that. And hopefully we're under the 4 minutes, and our redeployment that we just kicked off should be good to go. And then we can start talking about some other channels. Some other things I want to do here as well is our Dialogflow chatbot has really ugly text, and we can make it a lot cleaner as well. So I might want to have a different response there for the display text versus the SSML, which we can adjust, and then we'll start talking about other assistants. Okay, expanding this, we just sent the same zip code up. We're still in the same session, which is just sort of a cool concept that, like, I just deployed code, I'm in the same session, and hit the response again, I'm getting like totally different responses. I just think that's really cool. 314, we just cut out even more and made the responses better. So I'm going to go ahead and commit this. So in my find my rep, I'm going to say shortened responses and updated fallback message to prompt the user with the right things to say. And we'll commit and sync that. Why am I logged out here? This is me. That's still me. Alright, we can always push these later. As long as they're committed, we shouldn't lose them. Assuming my machine doesn't just go under in the next, couple hours of us streaming. Alright, so Alexa is live. The responses are going to be better, which we'll test in a sec. Google, we just redeployed, so we've got a new version up. We've covered both the things they didn't like. We have a better prompt on a fallback message. If you just say description or more details or whatever, anything that's not one of our intents that we understand, we'll teach you how to do it. And then we also cut down our response time pretty significantly and made it better. So that's great. Alexa's good. Go ahead, share that link wherever you want that's in chat. Let people know that they can find out how to contact their government much easier if they have Alexa, just by enabling the skill and saying a zip code. And then when Google goes out, I'll probably tweet it. So if you're not following me on Twitter, definitely recommend that. You can just replace the twitch.tv with twitter.com and you'll find me. Same thing, Suave_pirate. But now we've got Alexa and Google. We've got the chatbot too, which I'll once again just throw this in chat for you all. But one of the things I want to sort of point out here, right, if we take the response here, especially in the scenario that they gave us, right, this zip code that gives us a super long response, to me, like, if I throw this in a chatbot, this is garbage. This response here is outrageous. I mean, I have to like actually read it in its entirety to understand what's going on. And I think what we can do is break it up a bit better. And also, I'm noticing here that we're missing some spaces. So we have a space after the phone number, but not one before the 4. So let's go add that too. But one of the things I want to try to do is, if we're going through a Dialogflow chatbot, we should present a readable version of this. And we can do that by just sending back different data in our response. So in our dialog flow controller where we're using ask, we're sending this fulfillment text, and then we're also sending this explicit payload that's used for Google. So really, Google Assistant is going to use this. They care about this text-to-speech. You can also send cards back, which we might touch on later. But for the rest of it, it's going to use this fulfillment text. This property here is what this chatbot's using. This field is what we're using. So we can add like line breaks and stuff in here, and hopefully those will render properly. So if we just add, \n, or maybe we need to double escape with rn, or even like a double \n if it's like markdown or something like that, we can make it a little more readable, because the chatbot can be just as accessible as the virtual assistants are, depending on who's using it, right? Like hitting a link and just typing in a zip code might be easier for someone than having to go enable a skill or say talk to Find My Rep on Google. So let's make sure that we're helping those people out too, and then we're going to go and start talking about other areas that we can deploy this to, chatbots and otherwise. And today I also want to do a bit of Bixby work, so we're going to also try to build a Bixby capsule for this and even get that submitted, which I think will be really cool. So let's go fix that space real quick, and that's going to be on all of these. The issue is that we have no space here between this end period and the next one in the iteration. So we're iterating over each office. We're saying for office name you can contact, and then we wrap it up with a period for punctuation. Couple of problems here. We don't need this space here. We need a space either after this or before this, and I think that in order to handle it properly, we'll get rid of that. We'll basically trade spaces here. We'll trade the space at the end of email and swap it for the end of the period. That way the first one doesn't have to worry about it because we have the space here. Alternatively, we could do this, that, and trade out this one. We're getting the same thing in the end, so whatever. I'll just publish that. That way we have that if they start testing in the next 10 minutes. Okay, so let's talk about how we can build a better text response for these chatbots. In our dialog flow controller, our fulfillment text is our output. These two strings need to be different, and our ask method here is pretty agnostic as to what's being sent. So we shouldn't be processing this and then also like post-processing it to figure out where the line breaks are. Instead, what I think we should do is, while we're building this out, we should just build two different strings. And then we can return either a tuple type or an explicit class here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to update this ask to take in a string display text override. Now, the reason I'm saying display text override is that our welcome message doesn't necessarily have to be different. Same thing with our fallback. So I can even set the initial or default value to null. And now in this fulfillment text, what I want to say is display text override. And then we use our null coalescing, which means if this is null, then we use this side. If this isn't null, we just use this, and the rest of this doesn't matter, right? That's what our null coalescing operator is saying. So basically, if we pass in an explicit display text override, go use that. Now what I want to do is, in this response service, instead of just returning a single string, I want to return a tuple type. I mean, I could create a class for this, but we're already using dynamic, so it's too late. So we're going to create a tuple type where we have string output speech, and string display text. So that's the type we're going to return here, and we also need to adjust this in our interface. So instead of returning a string here, we're going to return a tuple type where we're going to have a deconstructed output speech and display text that we can use. So back in our actual service, while we're building this out, we should have basically a track of our display text and our response text. So I'm going to have, I can actually, I think, double assign this, so we can say response and display text. Is that legal? This isn't JavaScript, is it? I can't do that. We'll say display text equals response. So we're going to keep track of both of these. Luckily, when we make changes to this, this won't update post because it's not full mutability, but either way. Now when we're down here and adding these responses, what I kind of want to do is, we need to build both, but we need to basically add like list items, in my head at least, for each of these different offices. So let's do this. We'll say display text plus equals, actually I kind of want to separate different variables here, so we'll say var header text equals this, header text, and we're actually going to swap these around, and then we're going to say display text is plus equal to new line hyphen, and then we'll pass in that header text. Missing some semicolons, right? So far, response shouldn't change. We're getting our header text and we're setting it, but our display text is getting a new line every time and a hyphen. And down here, at the very end, just to make sure we're good, we need to return display text. Right, yep, and response. So on the consuming side, we need to update this both in Alexa and Dialogflow. So let's start just by testing this locally to make sure we're not breaking stuff. But on the Alexa side, we basically need to do the same thing here, or we just take the response. So the problem is that we're expecting this to be a string, but this is a tuple type. So we can deconstruct it and say display text and response. And we just care about the response. For now, we'll ignore the display text, but we could always use that in a card later on. Dialogflow side, we need to get the response string, and actually, because we already get this as a type of a tuple type with output text and display text, when we pass this in to ask, it's going to be able to use that automatically. So even if the display text is null coming back from this, we should be good. I don't know why it thinks this is dynamic. We have the return type here. This is a task of output speech and display text. Let's run it locally. Yeah, I didn't think that would build. Oh, we're returning here. Oh, because we need to do that for each of these types too. We're going to pass in null for both if things really go wrong here. And on this side, we can keep the display text the same, so we can just return response and response. And then for official, we're going to want to no longer one line. If this would say error or var missing response is that. And then we can return a type that uses this for both properties. So we can return missing response, missing response. Realistically, we could probably send null back here, but we might as well just send both if it's going to be the same. That's fine. Cool, so let's run this. Hopefully we'll build. Now we set up Swashbuckle to get our Swagger endpoints, so we have a UI to be able to test against our API, and that's what we're going to do here for Dialogflow. So what I can do is go over to our test. We're going to say talk to find my rep, and we're going to get the what would be request for a given zip code. And luckily, Google gives us the request JSON that was sent. We can basically copy that from here in this request object. This is all that we need. Heading over into Swagger, we can paste that in here and run it. Alright, so we hit our breakpoint, which I don't remember setting. So as we go through, we can shift FLF and a step out of here. Right, so we have our response string. If we step into this, we get a 500. Okay, that's what I thought. I don't know why this is being picked up as a dynamic. This is a tuple type. But let's say this, and then we'll say display text. And we gotta stop running. That's fine. So we got response string, display text. Cannot infer the type of implicitly typed, but this is not implicitly typed. We have an explicit type of string and string. What did we do differently on Alexa where we got this to work? display text and response equals, oh wait, info service dot do the things that we're telling you to do. Dialog flow controller. Also, I think we just did this backwards, didn't we, on this one? Yeah, we totally did that backwards. We don't want to do that. We can even use underscore, which is a common denotion that we're not using this variable for future reference. I'm wondering why this isn't working on dialog flow. String. Cannot deconstruct dynamic objects. But these aren't dynamic. They're not dynamic. Please believe me. Oh, is that why? Response string. Can we do that? Not sure what the issue is here. Cannot deconstruct dynamic types. We're not deconstructing dynamic types. We're explicitly passing you a string. I mean, I can do an explicit cast instead of an implicit if that helps make it feel better. Zip code is also dynamic. I can make you a string. Is that better? That's better. All right. We want this to be display text because we actually need it to be display text. Oops. All right, anyway, now that we've got our dynamic garbage in line, we've got our response string coming back and our display text. So let's run this again. We're going to, again, just take this request JSON and we're going to paste it into the Swagger endpoint we have for dialog flow. Blah, blah, blah. Send me through. Okay. So our fulfillment text is still not getting hit properly, I don't think. Let's break here and do it again. Oh, are we? Man, we're not actually sending the display text back, are we? We're doing it backwards. Display text is second, not first. We gotta rebuild, rerun it. I'm gonna keep this up in our other group of tabs because every time we rerun .NET and rerun our API from localhost, it's blowing away that window. So we'll keep this one up so that way we don't have to keep doing this whole copy paste nonsense. We got a breakpoint. Display text has those \ns, which is good, although we're probably going to want to add more as well. Alright, here's what we have. \n. For U.S. Senator, you can contact no one because we're not adding to the rest of the display text, which is fine. So let's go do that. Now that we've started building our display text with this header text, basically for each one of these lines, we should also add to the display text here. So I'm gonna get rid of my little lazy shortcut one-line if statements or two-line if statements, and we'll just add to each of them. Although it might even make sense for the display text to even get rid of sort of this jargon here, but we'll deal with that later. So response plus equals official name and display text plus equals, can actually keep the short version. Right, so we got the official name, display text, plus equals, you can say phone, and oops, not writing JavaScript, get out of that mindset. Grab the same value here. Didn't mean to cut it. We don't care about the or stuff. That's fine. And we'll say display text plus equals email. Official emails first or default. All right, let's run it. My dogs are barking in the background. So we've got it still running over here. We can just send the same stuff up. Skip this. We got our stuff all in order. And our display text looks like we've got all the data. So let's publish this. And then we're going to want to make sure that we didn't break stuff on Google, and we want to make sure that Dialogflow actually respects those new lines. Publish to our Azure App Service, which, thank you Azure for allowing me to host this for free. I'm using your baseline and still allowing HTTPS, because otherwise this would be a nightmare to have to pay for if people are going to bombard it. All right. Let's do this. Same Dialogflow setting. I'm going to take this exact same zip code. It's funny, it's trying to copy the text underneath. And let's paste it. Let's see what we get. It's not respecting our new lines. Let's try the fully escaped new line of \r\n. I also kind of feel like these might want to have new lines, unless I'm like missing something here. But yeah, like this 4 is still on the same line. Like this right here should be on the next line, and maybe we need like 2 backslashes or something, because if it's like following like Markdown's rules of line breaks, we usually need 2, but I can't imagine this needs it. It should be fine. It might just also not respect line breaks at all, in which case we'll have to figure something else out, or just accept that Dialogflow's web demo is exactly that. It's a web demo and not the real thing. Yeah, okay. All right, we might not be able to clean this up, but at least we cut out some of the jargon to make it a little more readable, although we're still sort of running on here, so we should add some spaces just in case. Display text, we'll just slap a space in front of that. All right, I think that's good enough for me. Well, let's go double check Google to make sure that's fine. We gotta open it up again. It hit it while it was deploying. Okay, this is fine. We can, in the future, shorten this up a bit too, similar to what we just did with the display text using like the basic card stuff. But I think for now, we're good to go. So, let me commit this using the GitHub desktop. Say updated display text support. Commit. We're not going to bother pushing since apparently that's just not acceptable right now. I'll push it later after the stream's over and figure out my credentials aren't accepted. But let's talk about other avenues here. So we have an Alexa skill and a Google action. Hopefully the Google action will be accepted in the next couple days. When it does, I'll promote both of them. Well, I mean, I'll promote the Alexa skill beforehand. But for the Google action, I'll promote it once it's out. If it doesn't come back in time before the next stream on Sunday, I'll likely clean it up anyway and try to get it out. It's just, there's no sense in waiting to do it on stream just to get the Google action out to help people find it. But we also have the chatbot, and now what I want to talk about is potentially adding Bixby support, which is going to be a whole thing. So let me, I guess, kind of take a step back and explain Bixby. So basically, Bixby is Samsung's virtual assistant. It's on every Samsung phone. I've got a Galaxy Note 10 with my super reflective background. Say hello to yourself, chat. And it's built in by default, and we even have a hardware button, which is actually super nice if you use it a lot. I use Bixby quite a bit. I know a lot of people who have Samsung phones do because it's the easiest way to do basic tasks, but you'd be surprised by what it's basically capable of. Now, relatively recently, as in like the last, I don't know, like year or so, Bixby has basically had sort of a 180 in terms of its enabling of developers to build stuff. And that's namely because of Samsung's acquisition of Viv Labs, which is originally led up on the tech side, at least by Adam Shire, who was the founder and creator of Siri, among others on that team. So what they basically have been working on is an entire infrastructure and a new way of building for Bixby. And so it's conceptually a little different than what we've talked about. We've talked about very simple applications like this for just give me the intent. I give you the utterances, you give me the intent back, and I take the slots and I do the lookup and do what I need to. Bixby's a little bit different. It has a different user experience in the end because it's meant originally for phones, although we can also build our Bixby capsule for Samsung TVs and watches and washer machines and refrigerators alike, so that way if wherever you've got a Bixby enabled device in your home, and you'd probably be surprised that you more than likely do if you live in the United States, you can use Bixby. It's a different mindset that the user has when using it, so there's a different way we have to build. So it started on the phone, which means we have the full capability of the screen, which is a little bit different than other approaches like Google Assistant and Alexa, especially, where Alexa started mostly focused on speakers and the audio and the sort of what's called a single modality mode of communication with the device, meaning you just speak and you just hear. That's audio is the only way that the only modality in which you're interacting. They started to introduce smart screens and introducing it to TVs and other devices. Google Assistant had sort of a different approach from that sort of chat-based first interface and voice to now introducing other devices like smart screens and speakers as well. But Bixby from the beginning has been built for Samsung phones. And because of that, they've enabled a lot of great ways to interface with the actual user visual interface on the phone itself. So they've also taken some approaches from learning lessons from the other virtual assistants around how to enable developers to build more. There's some really interesting things in there around what are called like natural language categories that enable you to basically be put into a certain category of a type of request the user might make with their voice to the device, or even typing. Both are supported. And with that, you basically, as an end user, can start to prefer different things. The sort of classic example would be, and probably not in most recent times here in the U.S. with COVID, but asking for a ride share, like book me a car from here to the airport, right? If you say that, what is the expectation around what's to happen? If both Uber and Lyft and whatever other car share service you have are available on Bixby, how is it supposed to know what it's supposed to do, right? So it can cast that into a category of like car share or ride share or ride booking, right? Whatever they end up calling it, I can't remember the name. And when they do that, they enable the end user to basically ask or to give a preference, right? So it'll say like, hey, I have both Uber and Lyft. Like, which one do you want to use for booking a ride right now? And if I say Lyft, it can also start to remember that and be like, okay, next time you ask for a ride, I'll assume you prefer Lyft, and we'll just book Lyft rides for you. So some really interesting approaches around discoverability of custom apps and stuff like that. Now, there are some challenges with Bixby. There's a proprietary programming language you have to learn to some extent. There's a proprietary layout structure for actually manipulating and using the AI, and there's really more of like, it's like quasi-functional procedural programming model they use on top of natural language understanding that you have to basically learn. They're pretty big barriers to entry. Luckily for you all, I've already done that like a year ago, and I've been building Bixby capsules for a while, both personally and as official support within our Voicify platform, which we're not going to get into today, but in future streams I'll be showing you all the types of things we can do with Voicify, which is the tooling I build every day. So I'm going to try to break down some of this stuff as we go, but it's going to be different than the things we did, and we're still going to try to do as much .NET with it as possible. We still want to make use of all this stuff we've already written in supporting our Bixby capsule, which, if I didn't clarify already, is what we basically call our skills or actions, right? We got Alexa skills, Google actions, Bixby capsules. That's what we're going to call them. So the first thing to know is that you have to install the Bixby Developer Studio. You can get that just by Googling it, but Bixby Developer Studio, and I think also BixbyDevelopers.com is the official site. Right, so boom, it's right here. Download for Windows, Mac, or Linux. It's an Electron app. I'm pretty sure it might be Node WebKit if that's still a thing. But it's the same interface across all the platforms. I've used it on both Mac and Windows. And that's where you build your capsule. It's where you write your Bixby programming. It's where you train your language model. It's where you do your submissions from, kind of in tandem with this like Teams and capsule section and all that stuff here, which we'll stick to. And again, like, yeah, if you look at Bixby Developer Studio, it takes you here. Now, I already have it installed, but I do think I need to go through an update, which I probably should have started first, right? So we've got Bixby Studio, and it even kind of has like a look and feel to VS Code. Let me close this one. We don't really need this. So you can choose between like light and dark theme. If you want to enable autosave and all that. I'm going to go ahead and install this update because this is a major version. I was just on 7.13. We need to get to this 8.0. I imagine there are pretty major changes here. I haven't done it a lot on this desktop. I usually use my work laptop for Bixby stuff. But it should be a pretty quick update. It's usually just an underlying update to the Electron app. And yeah, all right, cool. We're off and running. So the biggest conceptual difference between building Bixby capsules and traditional, I'll say traditional, but it's really just like other at this point, like natural language apps or conversational AI apps, is that it's not as heavily driven around intent and utterances and business logic. It's driven around what are called goals, right? So in the end, like our goal conceptually, like my goal in using a capsule like what we're trying to build is to get information about my local rep, visualize that, listen to it, all that good stuff. And so you really define your language model around reaching that goal, getting the data back from that goal, and then using the data like that to visualize, and then continue on to another one. Or maybe like there's steps to reaching that goal, and it's not so much like I give you the zip code and I get the response back. In more complicated scenarios, you might need to give a whole bunch of different information or go through certain steps and certain business logic to get there. A lot of that sort of like, you know, different business logic and different steps to get there is also sort of cast under Bixby's, forget exactly what they call it, but it's something along the lines of like automatic program generation, where basically on the fly, based off of what someone says, we're going to try to find the goal that we need to start heading towards, and it's going to basically build logic behind the scenes that we're going to execute against to get where we need to. I know this is like already a lot, but I'm trying to give you the baseline from them, and then I'll give you my explanation as we start to build it. But within that, you define actions and goals. Actions can have business logic that are simply built around the language model. You don't even need to write custom code. You can then optionally write custom code only in JavaScript, I think, at least in so far, using like Node-style JavaScript and ES6 code to execute custom logic. Or you can set a remote action to say, like, you know, just send this stuff to my endpoint and I'll handle it from there. That's what we're going to do. Because, again, we want to use all the stuff we already wrote. We already know how to do the lookups. We already have the connection to the Google Civic Information API via our Google Civic Info provider and our service for what responses to give back. So we want to make use of this stuff already. We don't have to write it again in Node or in Bixby's language. So we're going to use remote endpoints for those. But basically, see how much I can remember how to do this from scratch without using Voicify's templates. But we need to be able to define our actions and stuff, and let's start by just building a capsule and getting started. Now, a couple things to note. In order to use an official namespace, these are similar to like app IDs. If you've come from Android development or any Nix development really, or iOS development, these are kind of like bundle IDs or package IDs or app IDs, right? They follow a similar namespacing convention, except that you have to claim your namespace. Now, like I said, I've already built a few Bixby capsules, both under my professional accounts at Voicify and my personal ones. So I'm going to pull this over here and sign into my personal one, since we're doing this without Voicify for now. And I'm going to sign in, and hopefully I can remember my password over here. Which is why I wanted to pull it over here, so you don't have to all see my many sad attempts. Okay, so I've got an account verification. I need to pull up my verification code, which I'm going to do on my phone, so I don't even have to pull it in. Actually, I can just do it from like this confirmation on my phone here. My email hasn't been verified. I don't know if that's true. Verify account. Done. It says it wants a verification code over here, but I haven't received one. I got a link to verify it. Oh, okay. I got it in a different one. Let me just type this in. Just give me 1 second. 2 seconds. Alright, let's see if we can get verified and signed in here. So, like I was saying, you basically have to like almost like claim your namespace. So swinging this back over here, if I go to teams and capsules, signed in here, we can either create a team or like a group of capsules, and when we create a new team, we get our ID. So we're going to call this Suave Streams. We're going to put all the stuff that we make here, and we can claim that namespace. So we're going to call this Suave Streams, which means that when we do this, all of our I'm going to use my personal stuff here for the streams. Oh my goodness. I can't remember if this is the domain I bought. Is it just the one stream? Is that what it is? I've got one of these. Alright, that's fine. We'll actually just use my blog. And it has to be all lowercase. Suave Pirate. How about that? Okay, so we've got our team, right? The current team in the namespace is Suave Pirate. So that's what we just claimed. That means if any of you try to go in there and try to sign up for a Bigsby developer account and claim Suave Pirate, you're going to get a boot because I already claimed it, and it's too bad. Which means when we create our capsule, we can say suavepirate.find my rep and create it. Alright, cool. So they drop us in a README, which is super interesting considering it's not actually rendering the markdown, it's just showing the raw underlying markdown. But there's a whole bunch of resources you can do here to learn how to actually build Bixby capsules. But essentially what we need are models, actions, for which are technically models. We need endpoints for those actions that we create. We need views, and we need our language models and everything else. So let's see what we get started with here, which is a little bit more than what I was used to. So everything now is all under like a single training file. It used to be that there were like specific resources for the different locales, and you can still get to those, but you can also do all your training in one place and compile against everything, and do that. But we only really care about ENUS right now. But basically, similar to the places where we defined our intents and the utterances that match with them, we do the same thing here. We add, adding new training, we add what the thing will say, but instead of aligning it with an intent, we align it with a goal, and goals can be composed of multiple other things that are required. Now, we basically only really need our zip code action to actually be able to look stuff up, and then we can start from there. Some other things before we dig into that, just that are available here in the Bigsby Studio. We have our simulator. This will pop up in another window where we can simulate sending requests against our capsules. If I compile it, it'll probably complain to me for compiling because I have no phrases. So if I send anything here, it's not really going to be able to do much. Not authorized to access this. I probably have to sign into a different account on here as well. But then we can actually use and test it and go through the flow. So if I type something here and say run NL, I'll get the responses if it was on a Samsung phone on the right side. and then I can continue to say phrases and basically keep the session open. Okay, so let's see if I can remember how to do this. So concepts are more like sort of traditional models, and actions are basically what we need to define. So if we define a model, we can define the type as, oh man, I might need to like refresh on this stuff for how we define our actions. Oh yeah, it's a model. Oh my goodness, I clicked outside. What a fool. New model. It's a model. The template is an action. And we need to call this our, I kind of want to call it the same intents that we've been using that in here, right? So if we wanted to create one for our all zip code intent, we can say the all zip code intent model. Basically, we need to create models for each of the different types that we have and the output types. So conceptually, over here, we need a new model. And this can be a structure, which is similar to like a struct or a class. And we can say this is a rep response model. And then we can define properties on these, where we define the property, we define the type, and then we can basically say, like, you know, if this is minimal, optional, but max 1, we can basically define them as arrays or required, and we do all of that in these like property min-max settings. But we can also provide descriptions if you need to, but property name, we're going to need zip code. And the type, I wonder if they already have one. I'm also going to camel case this. Zip viv.core. So we got like date times and stuff here we can use. Can we say, is there a number? Can we grab just it's like text, there's something in here. Viv core text, viv core. We can start with text. We can just treat it as text and go from there. So this is minimum required, right? We have to have a zip code before we can actually do this. Oh, this is in the response. What am I doing? So we need to have a text of output speech, and that's fine. Now we also need to have a model for the request. So we can say rep request. And this, oh wait, I forgot to change the setting. Let me throw that in the trash and let's try again. New model type structure, and this is going to be rep request. Now again, we can set the property, and now this is where we want to do zip code. Property type, we can do viv core text again, and again this is required because we need it if we're going to actually be submitting anything, which means that when we're setting these required properties, if this model is going to be sent as an input for an action, it also means that Bixby can be smart about it and basically determine if we need to go hit a different like request to go fill in that value. It's really clever like that. It's honestly very impressive the way they do it. But for now, we're building a very simple app here, very intentionally, where we just care about the zip code and that it's required, and that in order to hit this action, you need to have one. So to say that this action needs that type, that's where we use our action that we called all zip code intent. And in the collect side, this basically means like this is what we need, right? So this is what we're collecting. We need the input, and we can say the name is also zip code, but the type is, we'll actually just say request. Let's see if I can remember this right. And the zip code is going to be rep request. This is also required, and the output from this is going to be a rep response. All right, so when we hit this intent, we're going to send, we need a rep request, and we're going to send a rep response. Now, we can go to our endpoints, and this is where we define when we hit a certain action, or we need to get to a certain goal using those actions, we're going to need to hit this endpoint. So they have examples here for local endpoints and remote endpoints. This local endpoint is what we use, and it even says here, JavaScript file name, which you can put in this code folder. So you can just put JavaScript code in here, define it, and send the request there, which it can all run locally, which is really cool. But what we need are a remote endpoint. So for the action name, that's the all zip code intent. The accepted inputs are going to be rep request. The remote endpoint is going to be HTTPS findmyrep.azurewebsites.net/API/Bixby/all zip code intent. And I'll get into that in a little bit, because basically for each one of these types we need to create a different action. For like find the governor, find the mayor, find the senator, all those different intents we made, we need a different action model for each. And the method we can make post. Right? Okay, we've cleared all our errors. I'm going to get rid of this. We're not going to write any local code. We're not writing JavaScript in this stream. We're writing C#. So now we need to align some training. So in ENUS, we can say some examples here. So I can say like 02110, right? If I add that training phrase, I need to define this as a viv core text. Hopefully I can do that, right? That's the type I need. And the goal is going to be an all zip code intent. We can save it, we can compile it, and it's an illegal plan because I did something wrong here. This is not telling me what I actually did wrong. Just saying it's illegal. Do I need to make it? I think I need to make another type. I think I need to make another type for zip code. We're going to create a zip code model here, and I did it again wrong. Wish I could just start with empty. New model. Model type is text. We want to call this zip code. The description is used for finding local gov info. Now in this request model, instead of being a viv core text, the type needs to be our zip code type. Now over here, we still are using the same rep request, which should then inherit that we need the zip code, which means in our training, I should be able to say that this is not a viv core text, but instead, this is a zip code. Please let me compile that. Rep request. Right, we're taking in a zip code here, and it's required. Not sure what it doesn't like about me here. Not telling me why it's illegal either. Oh, no specialization. That's all I want. I want that intent, and I want that as my NL. I don't need a form. I don't need a route. I just want it as a value. Just send me that. Missing. What does that even mean? Missing find rep request. What are you talking about? Cool thing they also added is you can actually view the underlying thing. So each phrase that you add for alignment of your NLU also gets added as a file, and they basically just generate a bunch of nonsense IDs and plans and things like that that are based around your goals and stuff like that. But structurally, you can see the text and the types that it's trying to grab. I'm not sure why it thinks this is an illegal plan. Let's see if we say like reps of 02. Right, so this is, again, we want the all zip code intent, and this I want to be a zip code. Illegal plan, tell me why. Alright, let's go do some research. Bixby Studio legal plan. Teach me, Bixby. Teach me what I did wrong here. Sick. Do I just not remember how to do this right? Can I do it from... Let's also close the simulator. We don't need that. From here. Right. Not learned. Not really telling me much. Required rep request. I don't need this. I don't want this at all. We don't want rep request, we just want the zip code, which means this should be input type of zip code, and this should just be zip code. I think that's why. There we go. Okay, that's why. We were trying to say that, like, okay, that's totally my bad. We were saying the all zip code intent originally had a required input of the request, and then the request had another type of zip code, which for the simple types we're trying to use is not cool. We can't do that. Alternatively, actually no, yeah, this is all good now. So what we can do is we have this send to simulator, open in simulator. So if we send this text, it should open the simulator and send it with the fully aligned stuff. And again, I think I'm just logged out. But you can also just put in the text. So if I say reps of, what was it, 90060 or whatever, and run that, we'll also be able to send that up and test that. Cool. So let's do this. I'm going to take a 2-minute break here. I'm going to grab some more water, and I'm going to also log into my Samsung account. That way we can actually run this, because basically it's saying, like, I'm probably signed into a different account here in Bixby Studio, and I need to be signed into one that has access to that Suave_pirate namespace that we just created on a different account. So yeah, I'll be right back, and then we'll keep working on this Bixby capsule. All right. I've got water appropriately with a Samsung Developer Conference water bottle. Let's do this. I need to, I think, sign into a different account, which I'm not sure what to do. Oh, I am on settings. Where is my account info? Am I missing something here? Oh, log out button. Doesn't even tell me who I'm logged in as. Okay, now let's log in. I gotta log in with the same Samsung account that I just did, which again is gonna take me over here. Log in. Hopefully it'll let me do it without 2FA because I just did it. Successful login. Open Bixby Studio. And we're back. All right, cool. Also, as I'm going through this and sort of showing you guys all the Bixby goodness, you know, feel free to ask questions in the chat. I know I'm running through a lot of different conceptual stuff, and I want to make sure, you know, you're following along as well. If you're watching this later on YouTube, you know, feel free to do the same. Empty interpreter found. I think that means that I'm missing something here. What did we do wrong? Did I not compile it? Also, I guess we'll change this to 7 since it said that's the latest. Yeah, we'll get into that. All right, we can go here, recompile. All right, cool. So obviously, still learning how to do that. Nothing happened. But what we can do is click this Debug Console button. The debugger is like one of the coolest visualization tools that I've honestly ever seen. So we can basically, before we even set up our webhook, we can validate that like we're getting the right structure, and we can also look at the data that's going to be sent up ahead of time. So basically, right, like we have our NL input that we're tracking. We say we get the zip code. That's good. We pulled out the right value. We sort of have that slot or parameter value. And then when we look at the goal of the all zip code intent, and it's going to try to send that request over API, it doesn't exist yet. But we can also look at this context, and this is basically like everything we have that we can handle, and then we have the sort of default dialogues. So what we need to do is actually handle the input, and we also need to handle the dialogue outputs once we have a response. Because basically what it's saying is like, we got the zip, we're trying to get to the all zip code intent. In the end, we want a rep response, which then we can track on a dialog flow and a visual, but we need something for that. So let's start building that in our .NET app. I'm going to create a new branch here. I'll do it from here. New branch. We'll call this feature/Bixby support. I have a feeling it's not going to let me publish because for some reason I'm logged out. But what we need to do is create some models for the data that Bixby is sending up, and then also the data that we need to send back down. So thinking sort of minimally, we need the output speech and the display text. We can get into like other things we can do with the visuals. Like Bixby has really cool support for like richer cards and list views and like form inputs and stuff like that. But for now, we'll start with some basics. Let's go create some models. So I'm going to create a new folder here called Bixby under our models, and then we'll create the ones that basically represent the request and response objects that we created in Bixby Studio. So we'll say Bixby request, and then we'll create another one here. Oops, not controller. Please don't start scaffolding things. Bixby response. So Bixby request, all we really care about is the zip code. So I'm just going to create a public property here called zip code. Although there is like a whole sort of like Viv context thing that's sent up as well. If we look at that debug window, it has all this stuff. So like we have the conversation ID. You can optionally ask for like a user ID, any context and things like that. If it's in hands-free mode or not, which could actually determine if you want to like render like an output speech versus a display text. Like if it's hands-free, it means that I invoked it with my voice by saying something like, "Hi Bixby." Right, wakes up my phone and I can start to say things, and we've got all this Bixby response goodness over here, and it's continuing to listen to me until I stop or eventually, you know, flick up or hit the back button. So we can make decisions based off of how we want to respond there. Similarly, we can do that with the other platforms we did as well, like Alexa and Google Assistant, by like determining if we're on a screen-based device or not. But for Bixby Studio, let's start by just at least proving that we can send the response down. So for now, all we care about is that the zip code is sent up. And then in our Bixby response, let's have output speech and display text. So we're going to have a public string of output speech and a public string of display text. So one of the things that's interesting is that Bigsby doesn't actually send the action information up that we're trying to hit. You'll notice that nothing in this context or this input object here for this request has anything about the action. We don't know that it's in all zip code intent. What we do know is that we defined in our endpoints that for the all zip code intent, we want to send a request here. Now this is where I said, like, I'll explain why we added this. Essentially what we can do in .NET is we can create a controller endpoint that takes this in as a variable as the intent name, and then we can pass that into doing some business logic. So let's go ahead and make a Bixby controller. And we need to inherit from controller base. And we need to set up our route. So following suit of our other ones, we're going to have API / and the name of the controller. So that will be API / Bixby. We're also going to want to grab this, right? Our civic response service. 'Cause we want the same responses. We want that consistent behavior, those consistent dialogues, no matter what platform we're coming from. So if I'm a Bixby user or a Google user, I should expect the same thing. Also, Favorite, I just saw your message in chat. Your review got rejected. Great to have in a turbulent time. Vote is too turbulent. Yeah, that sounds about right in terms of Amazon's politics. But anyway, let's generate our controller here. And then, like we said in our endpoints section here, we have our endpoint defined as expecting a post. So we can create an HTTP post endpoint. We can say that this also needs to take in, let's say we take in intent name as a variable. Right, so we define that in our HTTP post attribute here with these curly braces to denote that we're expecting something dynamic here for intent name. So /API / Bixby / intent name is what's going to match here. So we can say public async task handle request, and from body, from the HTTP body that's sent to us, we can get that Bixby request object, and we'll say Bixby request. Now we know we're getting that zip code. Oh, come on, Visual Studio. Everything's fine. It's all cool. Okay, so we've got our handle request. We can basically start to add some checks here. So if we say, oh, actually we need to do not just from body, we need to obviously say string intent name so we can actually use that, right? So if we say if intent name equals, we grab this text here, I should say we should be returning a Bixby response. Then we're going to say return new Bixby response, and for now we're just going to do a nice hello world, right? So display text, hello world, not Wordle, hello world, and we'll also have the output speech equal the same thing. And otherwise, actually, let's just do this anyway. We'll just send it no matter what, and we'll get into all this goodness here. But to prove it, we can say hello all zip code intent. Cool. I'm going to just publish this the way that we do around here with these classic right-click publishes. And once it's done, we can try to hit that aligned NLU again and see what we get back. Now we might need to, can't quite remember, if we need to send, if we need to set up the output otherwise first. Oops. Result. Yes, we know we have that. We didn't send the zip code here. Precondition failed. Executed unsupported input. Result is false. What are we missing here? It's not sending it to the input, but we have it. Why is input empty? This should say that our zip code is the zip code that we had. Close these windows. Let's see if we just hit it with the 02110. Output interrupted. Let's see if we run this locally, if we can get the expected output here. Right, so Bixby, if we say, ooh, try it out. All, I can never remember how to spell it. Grab that, come over here, and the zip code is 02110. Then we get the response of hello world. So something we've set up, something is not set up correctly. Oh, we're still using rep request. We should be using zip code. So we probably need to recompile, or it just compiled, so let's try that again. Okay, so now we have the input being sent up of 02110. Make sure you have valid inputs defined for your action. Don't forget to check your endpoints.bxb. Output interrupted. I think this basically just means that we didn't actually like send anything back. Although we should have received this. We're going to want display text as well. Oh, we need to define types for each one of these as well. Okay, let's do this. We can do type text, and we'll say output speech. I forgot, like Bixby requires you to like create a type for like everything. We're going to create another text type for display text. Don't really care about the descriptions, but basically it's saying like you can only have one property of any given type on a model. So because we literally already have output speech that is of type viv core text, we can't have another thing that's viv core text. I don't know why, but that's what we're working with. But we can, because we just defined a model there for output speech, we can do the same and change the types of output speech and display text. Now, if we come over here and try again in the simulator, we need to recompile and then hit it. Let's see if our debug gets the response back. We're sending the input. Make sure you have valid inputs defined for the action. I don't know what that means, to be honest. But let's continue on with creating a new dialog, and we'll say response dialog is our type. Don't really care what the type is, and so we want to, oh my goodness, I don't remember how to do this. If we handle this for rep response, I can never remember how to do these dialog types. Finding dialog, introduction to dialog, match, numdice. See what I mean with this, these barriers to entry to learning Bixby development. You gotta learn this like quasi JSON or data structure type with somewhat of business logic. Okay, it seemed to accept that this was result. Looking at the match types that they're using in these examples, we can match it to a type, and then we're basically assigning the actual name, right? It's similar to functional styles of programming, like, so if we say response, then the template, these aren't just strings, right? So we can use actual variables in these. Let's see if we can find it. Yeah, I don't care for that. There's a way to use variables in them with like a, concept this. It's like this pound curly brace. Right, so this is if we assign the variable name. So we can say like concept of whatever. Let me see if we can do response output speech. Is that allowed? I'm not sure if that's kosher or not. There's a different thing. It's not concept, it's value. So it's like the function name, right? So we want to get the value of response that output speech. Value of response.output speech. That's okay. Okay. So here's the cool thing about Bixby, right? Like all I had to do was to find this model, and I'm saying like, look, if we get a response, a rep response object coming back, this is the variable name, which is how we're able to pull output speech out of that in this sort of like string templating. Then we want to use that as our actual like output speech. So let's continue to see if we can hit it, which is unfortunately giving me grief. I'm wondering what I did wrong. We get the zip code. Show you valid inputs to find in endpoints. Alright. Let's heed their advice and head over to endpoints. Accepted input. Not a valid function input. Missing oh, because this is like the name, not the type. So, key difference here in why we wanted to Pascal case types and camel case properties and variables. We created a type called zip code. Zip code is a text object. It's a string. That's all we care to extract out of the text. So we get zip code. We give it a description, which is meaningless. Our action requires an input of zip code, camel-cased zip code, that is of type zip code. This input is where we define in our endpoint to say if we get an all zip code intent with this accepted input of the zip code property of it, because you can have required and optional types, then we want to use this remote endpoint, right? So we've got all our warnings in line. Let's see if we can't figure out why we're not getting our responses back. Yeah, this feels right. This feels like I just need to compile again or something. Reps of output interrupted. Don't forget to check your blah blah blah. We have the input. Did I mess up the output URL? Let's go hit the docs. I must be missing something here. Remote endpoints. Accept an input. Shoes. Show me the remote stuff. Remote endpoints. Structure. Shoe. Oh my god, I can't remember the last time I looked at all this stuff. Oh, I need to define a type. What is our type here? Totally forgot about that. On our, I think our action's invalid. Yeah, we're missing a type. We need search. Okay. Because there's like a bunch of pre-built types. Okay, let's see if I can get it in IntelliSense. Archive lookup, cancel, refresh, update activity, fetch something, begin transactions. But we're searching, right? Because although, like conceptually, we're searching for a response to the zip code search you're doing, right? Like that's what we're actually after. So that logically is the type we should have, which does require us to recompile. Now we get our response. We have our hello all zip code intent. Now you'll notice we have a table of our response here with hello all zip code intent and the display text as well. That's because we're not defining a view and it's going to try to default something. Or we have a, I don't know if their template does it, but basically we can start to define layouts and macros and things like that. But what I want to do first is get the dialogue working using our existing like response building stuff that we have here in our response service, and just use that in the Bixby controller. And then we can start to define the other actions that also take in the zip code intent but have like different alignment in terms of the phrases that we can provide the different responses for. And then we'll just basically touch it up with the UI, and we can go about the publishing process and we're good to go. So that's great. Let's go take a look at our dialog flow controller, because it's going to be sort of a similar output here as well. And all these sort of steps of like the welcome or what is the default we need to handle. If we have the contained zip code, we can follow that same rule as long as our Bixby capsule is defining those types. Then we just need to grab the parameter and get the response string. So I'm actually going to just kind of shortcut this and let's do this. Let's take the Bixby controller. I'm going to blow all this stuff away. In the end, we need to return a Bixby response. There is no real ask versus tell when it comes to Bixby. The way that like the session end works versus also like keeping the mic open is a little different. They're not the same. So like on Alexa and Google, if the session's open, the mic keeps opening up. On Bixby, the only time the mic opens up is, oh my goodness, it just opened on my phone. The only time the mic opens up is if you're using continuations, which is basically like multiple goals or multiple actions composed into finally finishing a goal, and it's all sort of automatic from their like automatic program generation stuff I was talking about earlier. But the session end, you don't have to send back in the response. The session stays open until the user just like slaps the back button on their phone or something like that, which is really interesting. So we don't necessarily have to worry about that. But what I do want to do, just to have some consistency, is we'll create a private Bixby response ask, and we'll take in string output speech and string display text. And then we'll just return a new one of these with output speech is output speech, and display text is output speech or display text. And we'll, again, just like we did in Dialogflow, have a default value for this of null. Slap some semicolons where we're missing them. We'll say Bixby response is null. And at the end of this, we'll return response. Now, for zip code, we don't need to do all this nonsense because we've got that stuff strongly typed against our model. So instead, we can just say Bixby request zip code, and we don't need to do all this casting nonsense. We already have them. None of that silly stuff we did by using dynamics. And we should be good to go here. So we have it injecting. Everything's working. Let's go ahead and run it locally and just try to pass in that all zip code intent. And I'm missing something here. What do we have? Like too many curly braces, not enough curly. Oh, come on now. We'll pass in like one of the zip codes we had. Just make sure that the call to the Civic Information API and all that is working. So if we have like a all zip code intent, whatever it is. If I go to endpoints, I'll grab it again. All zip code intent. Hit that, and for the zip code, 02110. And we have it. We have our output speech, and we have our display text, which currently is the same stuff here because we're not separating it. Cool. Let's publish this and see if we can't get that to hit properly from Bixby. Yeah, stop debugging. Alright, we're published in the simulator. Reps of 02110. Tell me my reps. So, here's another interesting thing about Bixby is that we probably don't want all of this in the response output because it's going to be more useful in the display. Because again, people are really only using these from their phones. We can check against the hands-free mode, but for now, let's change our output speech to be something simple like, here's what I found for in the name of the zip code. That way we can sort of ensure the user that we heard them properly. And then on the output, the display text, we can use the display text. But either way, like we're getting our response here in the simulator on our request from Bixby, and we spun this up in like an hour, if that, of me struggling to remember how to do this stuff. So let's do this. On the Bixby controller, we want to have the output speech be a little different. So in the cases where we have zip code, we don't just want to use the response string here anymore. We want to say, here's what I found for, and we can take Bixby request.zipcode. We still want that display text. We can now mark this with an underscore because we don't really need it. And let's publish this and see what we get. I don't know if we can hit localhost from this too, by the way. It might be worth trying, since I'm not sure if these requests are going to actually be executed from my local device or not. I'm honestly kind of curious, so we might try that in a little bit too. All right, either way, we've republished, which means we can just send the same request again. Here's what I found for 02110, and it's like output speech and display text are the same, which means that we're not getting our response back properly. So our display text we're getting from this is the same thing, which is not what we want. Right, so why is display text coming back null here? Let's go try this out locally. Which also, I'm running this locally on HTTPS, so I kind of want to see, just real quick while we're running, if I replace this, can I still hit this? I can, but I did not hit my breakpoint, so that makes me think that that's a lie. Did I not save? I've compiled. Maybe I need to end the session. Can I reset? 02110. Ran into a problem. Yeah, I don't think we can hit localhost. Okay, that's fine. Luckily, we can simulate that against our Swagger endpoint. We have the Swagger endpoint over here, but I need to get it with Bixby, so I'm gonna refresh this. And then we can keep this open, that way if we need to keep testing, we'll be fine. So I'm gonna grab that same intent name, and this is our good one, so then I can set the zip code to 02110 and send it. Let's see what we get on our breakpoint. So we are getting display text here. Oh, you know what it is? We're doing this backwards. There it is. Just rubber ducked myself while on stream. This is like the best way to code ever. Display text, if that's null, then we want output speech. So we can publish this and then we can validate it. Now, the next step is to actually create a view where we can render this information. We can definitely take this further to, probably not today because we don't have too much time left on the stream, but on Bixby, because again we're more than likely, and we can even target it specifically for when we're on a phone. If we could create like a list response for like your local government, for like each official with their phone number, and then like have a button you tap on like each one to be like, yeah, call this person. Like in this case of like the 02110 responses we're getting, like if we could just be like, oh yeah, like Elizabeth Warren, like call her up, just tap the button, literally like, who is my senator? Elizabeth Warren, tap, done. Like that'd be so cool. I think in this stream we're just going to focus on at least getting it in display text, and then we can look at breaking that up in another one. And then we'll look at the submission process as well. All right, let me close all these extra tabs we've got of this stuff spinning up. I'm going to validate it again just by sending a zip code up. And we probably need to recompile or reset the session. Send that. Finding rep responses. Here's what I found. Okay, so this is, we see we're getting the display text, but now we actually need the view. So the way we do that is actually it's similar to what we did with the dialogue. So it's all sort of like implicit in some ways, right? So because we're defining our language model to say like, if you hit this action, go to this endpoint, and also this action returns a rep response. That's all the action cares about. But now we also say, hey, we have this dialogue that takes in a rep response, and it says it using this in the template output speech, and we take the output speech property. This is our own custom defined object that we defined here and in C#. Views are the same way, and there's basically layouts and views and macros and stuff like that that we can use to like compose views in a complex way from our own objects. But what I need to do is define a layout. We'll say like rep response layout. So we need to match just like we did on the dialogue side, right? So here we have this same match. I'm literally just going to copy this. So in our layout, we got rep response. There's sort of display modes that we have, and then we basically define a layout structure. So you can do things in here like use pre-built components that Bixby supports. And in this case, let's start by just displaying a paragraph of text. So we'll say, just like this in this value here, we'll say just display response dot display text. And we can even use the different styles here for the paragraph text. I probably don't want this to be a title. I probably want this to be detail, and we can make it, I don't know, medium soft. I don't even know what that looks like. But if we go over here, let's reset this session, send another zip, and we didn't get anything. Why didn't we get anything? Got a rep response, mode summary. I wonder if that's almost like defining it as this. Taking response. Try just killing the debug session here. Yeah, we're getting that. Why are we getting that default display? New view. Let's see what I'm missing here. Go back to the docs and say layout, right? Yeah, right. So looking at the layout documentation here, it's important to teach Bixby how to display results and interactions in a user-friendly way. It's exactly what we're trying to do. Trying to dump this ugly text into a paragraph. Adding a layout to the capsule improves. Defining a layout. Right, so we match, we say the type. Maybe we need to have this in an object structure. Is that what we're missing? Because I know you can define multiple types here. Render. Right, so we've got a match and render. That's the sort of key part. I'm just going to delete this. We don't need the views. Match, mode summary. This looks a little different. That could also just be that the documentation's out of date or something too. So if we take this like well, we don't use semicolons here. Like that. result view. Oh, let's say I just take... Oh, they're using template macros. I know you can use ifs and things like that. Let's undo this stuff. Rep response. Maybe the fact that it's a summary. What modes are there? Details. Does that work? That simulator again. Reset. What's it complaining about now? Empty interpreter. Compile then. Let me compile you. It's the only ones I have open. Come on, Bixby, help me out here. You just relearned those even though nothing's changed. Session timed out, that's fine. Just let me send you a zip code. There we go, look at this. We might have just needed to refresh the whole thing and recompile this anyway. So, in this case, Bixby actually does respect the line breaks, right? So, here are all your reps, and we have them like title case massive. But let's go ahead and change this from title L. What was the other one you were using? Detail M soft. Send that again. That looks like the same thing unless I'm going insane. There we go. Look at that. Look at all these reps. Every single person in 02110, it's right there. And all we have to do is type in the namespace. So now what we need to do is define actions for the other types that we support. So going over here and looking at our response builder that we call here, or our response service rather, forget response, we have different scenarios here for the different types. So we have the all zip code intent. We're covering that. Let's go ahead and cover our gov zip code intent, senator zip code, and mayor zip code intent. And we'll just send those up as different endpoints in Bixby, but we don't actually have to change our code at all because all we care about is this and the fact that we have a zip code. And then we can talk about like welcome messages and stuff like that later, or even wrap this up on Sunday. Cool. So we need to go to define new actions. So I'm going to create a new. Actually, can I just copy this? No? Can I? I can't do that. Okay. Well, I'm just going to copy all the input then. New model type action, and this is going to be our gov zip code intent. Change this to gov. Another new model action. Make sure we get the right types. Senator zip code intent. Senator zip code intent. We'll change it here. Senator. And we've got one more for mayor. One more action to define. Except instead of senator, it's mayor. Mayor. So for each one of these actions, we need to just update the endpoint as well. So just like we have this single one for all, it's going to be the same thing for the other three. So we have gov, senator, and mayor. And we can just paste these as what we're going to be sending up in that intent name parameter to our endpoint. So now let's go define some training phrases for it. So right now we only have two training phrases. We have our reps of 02110 and we have just, you know, a zip code, right? So even if I say in the simulator a different one, 01887, it should understand, and I gotta refresh that. That's a different zip code and it's gonna send that up, right? So here's the reps for 01887 and that's fine. If we wanna do the, what was it, 960, is that the California one? We're gonna get that massive response. All right, here's all those details for the California one. We might get rid of that 4-2. That's kind of overkill. So we need to define the other one. So we can say mayor of 02110. We can create a whole bunch of these ahead of time. So we can say governor, governor 02110. Senator of 02110. 02110 Senate. 02110 Mayor. 02110 Governor. And now we can define these with our different actions. So just like we have these two sending to all zip code, for this one for governor, say gov, get that pre-filled, and we want to grab this as our zip. Done. Alright, mayor. Mayor zip code intent. And this is a zip code. Done. This is a senator. This is a zip code. Oops. Come on, fingers, help me out. Done. This one is also a senator. This is the zip code. This is a governor. And this is a zip code. Welcome to training machine learning models, everyone. Mayor. Everyone tells you it's magic. It's actually a whole bunch of stupid typing. Done. Save, save, save. I think there's a save all up here and I'm just too lazy to scroll. Compile. How are you going to tell me these aren't learned? Save. Compile. Learn them. There we go. Now they're all learned. Alright, so let's make sure this works properly. In the simulator, I'm going to reset, make sure we got all the latest stuff. It's like governor of 02110. This should just tell me about Charlie Baker, not the rest of it. Boom, Charlie Baker. And you can call them, and you can email them. Perfect. So that's it. That's all there is to it right now. We can go about actually finishing up the publishing process, which again is a little different than the other steps for Google Assistant and Alexa, where instead of going to like a cloud developer portal and saying like, yeah, here it is, and I tested everything, it's all running out of this IDE. But there is a little bit of a step here. So some things to note. Submissions you can do publicly, and you can do to make sure you test on your device, right? So if, even though I'm signed in on the same Samsung account on my phone, I can't just go and ask for my governor information here yet. What I have to do is go create a private distribution, permission required. I am the team. I am the admin. Oh, we need to create it, right? So we register the capsule. So we just created it here, but it's find my rep. Right, so we've got a capsule now. Over in Bixby Studio, we need to refresh. Back to submissions, new submission, private, and now we can do it because we have that version. So we'll say initial test. And we submit, when we submit it for private, it's going to do some validation to make sure that we still have some stuff working. If we're missing things like missing training or missing anything else, we'll get a failure here. But we didn't because we're super good developers. But what we did get is this ID. Now, what I can do, and let's see if I can even show this on stream without breaking anything, is I'm going to plug in my phone to USB-C, get Visor set up, and show you all how to do this if you have a Samsung phone, because it actually makes it super, super useful. We turn on Do Not Disturb. Go to Bixby. This plugged in. Can you all still see me? Can you all still hear me? We're good. I know last time we tried to do that, it wasn't really working. We open up Visor. Allow. This might. Oh, you know what? This is probably the old version of Visor. We're not allowed to use here. The Chrome app version. I need the new Visor. The new real Windows app Visor. That actually like really lines up with the colors here in Bixby. It almost looks like this is part of Bixby Studio, but this is a separate window. Okay. No Android devices connected. There we go. All right, so we can view. This is going to be probably pretty blurry, so just a heads up. What I've got is my Samsung phone, and I'm in the Bixby app right now. So if I go, let's see if I remember how to do this. Some things have changed. Sign in on the same account. If I go to developer options, which I think there's something you have to do ahead of time, and I can't remember, in order to enable developer options, similar to trying to turn on USB debugging and developer options on Android. But if I go into testing here, and I turn on testing on my device, I need to enter a revision ID. Now this revision ID is this. So if I say 2020, just pull it up side by side here. 2020-156-00822. Is that all right? 2020-156-00822 and apply. What? I'm on this phone. What are you talking about? Oh my goodness. Alright, let me hide this while I sign in. See if this will work for me. Doing stuff on my phone right now behind the scenes. Yep, I'm all set. Just refresh your main device screen. So did it work? Are we good? Alright, let's see if we can get this to work. Right, so back here in Visor, I'm in the Bixby app. I can also alternatively just use the hardware button, but if I say 021, oh man, something's not set up right here. Maybe I'm not logged in on the right account or something. On device testing, 2020-156-00822. I'm missing anything here. Yes, please let me log in. Sorry, I'm on my phone right now trying to get some of this stuff to work. Alright, looks like it's not liking me. Either way, what we'll do is next stream on Sunday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern, we're going to wrap this up. And hopefully, assuming that the rest of the world is sort of back to making reform against police brutality and everything else, and hopefully we don't even need this app, we can get back to our Warzone controller and eventually our accessibility-driven keyboard. Now, just to sort of recap the status of that and what we want to do on Sunday. So, Sunday, hopefully our Google action goes through, and I'll be promoting that on Twitter, so make sure you check out Twitter at Suave_Pirate, same thing as my Twitch handle. We're going to make sure everything's good there, do any other final updates like we did today, and then we're going to get this tried to submit to the Bixby marketplace as well. So we'll go through all the other things required to do that. And then in terms of the controller stuff, last time we all talked on stream, there's basically a couple things we needed where we were trying to be able to talk to our device, issue commands, have that run over WebSockets to a app running on our Windows machine here, so a UWP app in this case. Then use that to execute virtual commands, and when we did that, we were running into issues where basically the games actually ignore any virtual input or keyboard injection, and instead everything has to be run over USB. Our next idea, after running through 10 or so other options, is to use an Arduino as an actual USB device. So there's only certain types of Arduinos that support that, which I didn't have, which is the Leonardo and I think the Mini or the Micro now also run the same spec. And we have one. I ordered one right before the end of the stream about a week ago, and now we actually have an Arduino Leonardo which we'll be able to set up as a USB device. And I also have an Ethernet shield, which came really banged up in the packaging. It's like all bloated and banged up. Hopefully it's okay. I haven't really opened either of these, other than, you know, I made sure that it wasn't totally busted on this one on the shield, but I haven't actually checked the Leonardo. But, you know, the idea is that these, unlike what I'm used to with Arduino, with the Arduino Uno, which I also have one right here. So this is, you know, my previous Arduino experience with an Arduino Uno, is they have a couple of different major key differences that actually enable us to use USB and actually treat it as a keyboard. So there's a new Arduino API we can make use of called keyboard, and there's new hardware components that we can use. So let me actually switch here to camera only real quick.